Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the podcast. Today's episode is going to be with Adam. Now, Adam was so kindly passed on to me by Chris, so thank you, Chris, for passing him on if you're listening. And I know this is an episode you've been waiting to hear. So, mine and Adam's conversation is mostly about photography and creative processes and, why you should not really care about gear as much, and etc., and how he got into and developed the style which he has for his photography. And as always, I'll link him and Chris in the description down below. So thank you so much once again for coming back and enjoying this podcast, and I'll see you very, very soon.
So my name's Adam Bally. I'm a street photographer primarily. I'm based in Leeds. I started photography the middle of 2019, so it's not something I've done for a long time particularly. I started I got the first camera when I went to Japan, which was the middle of 2019. It feels like a lifetime ago, the prospect of actually being able to travel and go on holidays. So it's crazy. But so in anticipation of what was a once in a lifetime kind of trip, I wanted a camera to try and do it justice. I didn't. I had a rubbish camera and even worse skills using that camera. So the photos were pretty terrible. But from there, it just kind of developed. I started to see a lot of photographers on Instagram and started to see just what people were creating, and it just sort of ignited a little bit of passion to want to get better, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to give you some context, because I know we don't know each other very well, but to give you some context on people who, are avid listeners of the podcast and are people who consume the content a lot. They're starting out professional photographers. They're people starting to get their feet in. They're starting to understand their style, etc. I mean, for me, you have, you originally passed on by Chris, a good friend of mine, who, he was like, you've got to get this guy on, man. His photos are crazy, and all this thing. I looked, so I was like, this guy's style's really, really cool. I mean, like the initial question there is like, how did you develop? And for those who are listening, I'll obviously link all of Adam's works in the description down below for those who are interested. But, how did you sort of develop that style? Because it is like a very, I guess, like from a color grading perspective, but like, the tone wise, like for me, it has a very, unique style. So how did you kind of, I guess, come up with that style, or, what was it inspired by? Was there like a specific like photographer or artist or etc. that you, specifically try and emulate? Or was it, what's the story behind that?
So my style as it is now, which I guess is trying to bring a cinematic sort of feel to what is otherwise sort of candid street photography. A lot of inspiration came from some other photographers. In particular, one a guy called Billy D, who shoots in New York primarily, and I think I would look at his images and sort of sit and study and be so perplexed with, how does he make these images look this way? If I went out and shot that same scene, it just wouldn't look that way. And that's what started to get me into the realms of looking at the color palette and looking at the ways to change the ways that I edit, because you start to realize that there is quite a lot to be said about the post-production process. You certainly need to get things right in camera. Editing should never be to mask something that's gone wrong. But I think it was, for me, that was the turning point when I started to realize that those things kind of worked in tandem. And it was kind of a 50-50 between what you did in the camera and then how you present that image through editing, from looking at the color grading, and yeah, that sort of has led to the point where I'm at now, where it's a case of trying out different colors, trying to look at different palettes, changing, going from kind of quite radical to quite subtle changes, and applying that to different scenarios. I'm setting myself challenges, as I have done in lockdown, just kind of go out, walk around my local area. I'm taking pictures of, people's cats and stuff like that, just to see if I can make that look, can you make that look cool? and you can, if you edit it the right way, you can still give it that feel. You can still make it look like a still from a film, which is really on trend in terms of what's out there on social media. A lot of people are trying to do this. So I guess I was a little bit ahead of the curve, but certainly inspired by some really great people that can just take it to a whole nother level when it comes to this style of photography.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, for me, it's one of those things as, as a filmmaker and a photographer myself, it's one of those things where, I think if you push the boundaries, or, you take a style and you put your own spin on it, and then you push you push those boundaries a little bit more, and you tweak and change and just try and be creative, I think it's really, really important, especially in like a time like this, right, where it's, so negative, and so there's like, it's been really hard for like people who are, used to going out every day and shooting in the big city or whatever, people who live in London or Leeds or whatever it is, and I think that a lot of people are trying to find some, challenge within their surroundings, right? Like the lockdowns and etc. are giving you an opportunity to really push your creative boundaries. I mean, like, what have you been doing specifically, right, not necessarily this lockdown, but like in the lockdown specifically, to still challenge yourself? Because I think that's one of the main things that like a lot of photographers or a lot of creative people really run into is,
Yeah.
How do I challenge myself when, I'm not allowed to go outside, or when I have to stay local, or etc. When those limits are there.
Yeah, 100%. In the first lockdown, I went through a kind of a phase of trying all different things. I wanted to get into Photoshop and become quite good with that. I got to a certain degree. I wouldn't say I nailed it. There's so much you can do in there that it would take years and years to crack it. But I did the typical kind of trick photography that people try when they get into Photoshop. I did the picture of me in the living room where there's like four of me. I'm sat in the chair, I'm on the couch, I'm on the floor, and using the layers to bring it all in. I did some really fast sort of shutter speed photography, throwing a ball in a pool of water and watching the splashes and all that kind of good stuff that's just fun. It's just and it was easy to do at home, and it allowed the creativity, I suppose, to come out really in a different way.
Yeah.
I think as things started to open up a little bit to the point where you could kind of go out and it was acceptable to sort of take a walk around the city, and at that point I started to, I guess, try and document where I live. So I mean, everywhere's got its own character. Everywhere's got its own charm. Certain places naturally are kind of done to death. New York, London, Paris, Tokyo. There's millions and millions of people there, and chances are, no matter where you take a shot, someone's taken that shot before. So for me, in the absence of being able to travel, I had plans to do quite a lot of traveling in 2020. I just took the opportunity to kind of try and showcase where I'm from, and try and present the city in a way that I'd not seen anyone do before. And again, being heavily influenced by films, and I just, I started to try and see if I could make where I live kind of look like that big budget Hollywood production. Could you create that drama? And you can, for the most part. It's not as easy as when you're not dealing with such iconic buildings and places as you would be in some other cities. You can still find some really good frames, some really good compositions, and that's where my photography really started to take shape to the style that I have now. That was heavily influenced by just every opportunity I got, just going back into the city. Luckily I only live quite a short distance away from the city, so I could just take myself there. And obviously, you've seen from my work, a lot of it is at night. Just wander and just see what was unfolding, which was very little at the start, but that in itself, it had its own kind of feel, because the streets were bare. There wasn't a lot going on. That gave a real somber feel to things that I wanted to capture out. I wanted to document kind of what the world was like, or what my small part of the world was like during a really, hopefully a time that we'll never experience again. Hopefully this is in a year's time, this is a long lost memory that we'll, we won't still be in it. And so I just wanted to document it in a way that was still creative, but still told the story of what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, for me, it's been really interesting to see, as I say, through my line of work and what I do, I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of different people, and I think it's been interesting to hear their stories about, what their areas were like during first lockdown, and what was it like. I mean, the next question I was thinking of asking was like, for street photography stuff, I imagine like the middle of lockdown was really difficult, I guess, to do street, because surely like there wasn't many things happening, right? Because all these streets like documenting what's going on, etc. But I don't know. I mean, like, was it like an extra challenge, or was it like that part of the magic, I guess, in some ways, of capturing in a time like a street that's normally like absolutely jam packed and really really busy, and it's just dead.
Yeah, if anything, it kind of made it. I mean, you'll see on Instagram, you'll see the trend amongst street photographers is, trying to isolate a subject. We spend our lives kind of eyeing up a composition and then just waiting patiently for one solitary person to pass by that composition so you can take the image, so that it gives some depth and some story behind it. So in lockdown, that was, you were more likely to have that. So some of the places that I'd shot, if that was in a normal time, if people do follow me, people see my work, they'll see there's a photo which is probably one of my most loved photos. It's certainly my favourite photo that I've taken. It's a guy just holding some shopping bags. There's a backdrop of what's called the Queen's Hotel in Leeds. Now that street that was a Saturday night. That would be immensely busy. That would be crowds of people going out, drinking, celebrating, partying, whatever. You would never get that composition in lockdown. So it kind of made it. It gave, and even the fact that because there were so few people about, big part of street photography is trying to tell a story, and because there was just a few people around, you found yourself asking, why is that person out? What are they doing? Where, how are they dealing with this situation? Everyone just became a little bit more endearing because you had less people to focus on. So you really honed in on an individual, and you kind of wanted to know that story. And that's what I hope people do when they look at some of the photos I take. They want to build their own narrative. In reality, I mean, this isn't going to shatter the fourth wall or anything, but for the most part, these people are just out doing the same boring stuff that we do when we go out. But if you can capture it in the right way, people don't think that. People think that there's a real enchanted story behind it, which there almost never would be. But if you can get people thinking, then I think that I would imagine that's what most creative people want. They want to provoke a thought, whatever that might be. So yeah, I think in some ways the lockdown helped with that. I don't think I would have arrived at the style of photography that I have if it hadn't have been for lockdown, for the extra time I had in it to learn color grading process, the extra time to be able to go out and shoot, and even from simplistically, like being in a better financial position, which for a lot of people has not been the case. But for me, working at home and not being able to do anything, I made a real investment in myself and in photography. So I bought some new gear, which I don't advocate that you need to buy a lot of cameras and lenses to be a good photographer. You certainly don't. I still find myself a lot of time shooting on the first lens that I bought. So you don't need that. But incidentally, the first lens that I got for my camera that I use now, I got off of Chris. So he's got a part to play in this story. He set me up with my first Sony lens. So that's where the journey began. So yeah, it's been a defining period of time in terms of my photography, and now, you know, I'm excited to see where I can take that, hopefully to take it to other places, because, you know, there's only so many times you can wander the same streets.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, for me, it's, you know, as I say, it's been one of those interesting concepts. I'm glad you mentioned about, you know, gear not being the holy grail of what you can do. You know, like, I think that an advocate for a lot of creatives is, you know, what can you do with the limitations that that camera may have or that lens may have, or etc. You know, what can you do with those limitations is also part of why we do it as well. And you know, I think lockdown was just a enhanced, you know, thing in that, you know, I think that helped that creative process, or etc. I mean, would you say that you've become probably in some ways a better photographer because of that, having those limitations, and you know, been in a situation where you can only do this and this?
I think so. Yeah, I think because, you know, the my ability to express myself kind of through the photography was limited to just taking those walks around the city. So you're kind of pigeonholed into a certain aspect of photography. I was always working during the day, so obviously when you're in the winter months, you know, there's no daylight. So even, you know, shooting at night is massively challenging. I always say to people, um, if you can nail kind of photography at night, you'll be so much better in the day. Like, if you can use the light, the sparse amount of light that there is on a night, then once you're in the daytime, you can, you know, you'll be away, and you'll be able to really, you know, push the limits of your photography. So yeah, being able to, or rather being restricted to what we could do, certainly just, yeah, allowed me to just hone in on, well, what do I actually really want? What am I trying to achieve through photography? In a very casual way. I've always approached it quite casually. I want to be good. I want to improve. I want to get better, but I try not to put myself under too much pressure, because I always want to enjoy it. If it's not fun for me at the minute, it's for the most part, it's a hobby. If it went further, then great. But I just want to enjoy it, and not kind of pressure myself into trying to do too many different things. I think I've picked the area that I like, and it's all just about expanding within that area.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. And I think it's one of those things where people sometimes, even when they're looking to, you know, let's say for example, they like explode overnight and it's like actually an option for them to do it full time. And it's actually, you know, I think a lot of people need to ask themselves, or potentially need to ask themselves, you know, okay, well, why do you want to do it full time? Are you sure that's the thing you want to do? And, you know, I've got other content talking about this before, but it's one of those things where it will change your perspective, it will change your life, it will change your habit of it, because you now rely on it. Right, there's a big, like, you can't really, oh, I don't feel like shooting today. Okay, in your case, you can't, you know, you can choose not to shoot if you don't want to, right? In my case, if I don't feel like shooting, I still have to go and shoot, right? Because it's my, you know, it's my job, right? So it does change your relationship a bit, and I think that one of the main questions, you know, for those who are listening, who are thinking about that step or are going to be thinking about that step in the future, you need to really ask yourself, you know, are you sure you are okay with how it can change? Because every time it will change your relationship, but I can't tell you, Adam can't tell you, right? You won't be able to tell how it's going to change, but it will, 100% it will. I mean, there's the follow on question there. I mean, something that I've been thinking about as well is like, what would you say is your, like, I guess, favorite memory of like street photography wise? Like, is it like a shot that's very memorable, not necessarily during lockdown or like COVID, but like specifically, is there like, oh, that was amazing and that was just like a luck of the moment thing, or, you know, is there anything like that, or have you not quite attained that shot yet?
And I think, again, sort of going back to the photo that I was talking about before. Now that, there's a couple of reasons why I have quite fond memories of that, and it's not just the, I mean, that night in particular, it was extremely foggy. It was like the perfect conditions to create a really moody sort of cinematic set of images. But the reason I was so pleased with that is because it was a sign of confidence. So for me, when I started shooting street photography, I'm using a 24 to 70 lens. So at the wide end, if you want to get an interesting subject in your photo, you've got to get pretty close to that person, and that's hard to do. I mean, at the minute we shouldn't be getting close to people anyway, but even prior to that, it takes some guts to get into street photography. You've got to just, I guess, in a way, sort of suspend your inhibitions, and if you want, we can expand on that, because it's probably something that a lot of people that get into it want to. I get asked a lot, how do you get into street photography? Are you not worried that people are gonna so this particular image, it marked a point where I'd started to just embrace what I did, and I mean, I was very close to this guy. If you look at the photo, I was kind of at the other end of the street. I saw him stood there. He looked really interesting, and I sort of ran across the street. I must have been a couple of, I was definitely 2 meters. So at least, before anyone calls the police, I was with 2 meters, but that's still pretty close. And I just did it, and I thought, what's the worst that can happen? You can turn around and say, "What are you doing?" And I'll just explain. I'll show him the photo. The power of social media. Somebody knew the guy, and they found him, and he loved it, and he was buzzing about it. So it can, having the confidence and approaching it with confidence can really, really help.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I think there's a lot of street photographers and a lot of people who I follow and a lot of people who I know who, for a long time there's this misconception in photography, or people who are just starting out. It's like, oh my god, he's just asked a stranger, can he take his photo? Like, oh my god, right? He just walks up to someone and goes, oh, do you mind if I take your photo, etc. And it's one of those things where I think that for the majority of the time, it's just like you have to make that decision, right? That you're gonna do that, and that you're gonna, that it's okay to do that. And I think, of course, you're gonna get some people who go, oh, actually, would you rather I didn't, or, oh, I would actually rather you didn't, or etc. And that's fine, right? But I mean, the question there is like, how do you, I guess, develop that guy? I guess, want or confidence level, or etc. How do you develop that? Because it's not something that you can just have, right?
No, definitely. I think it's just repetition, really. I think you just have to just keep doing it, do it more and more, and just kind of go through in your own mind what the worst case scenario is. What's the worst that can happen? You can approach someone, you can take the photo, they can ask you to delete it, and if they do, you should. In my view, you've got the right to take the photos. It's perfectly legal. But if someone objects, I don't think we should be rude about it. You should oblige and probably delete it. But that's the worst case scenario. I've been doing this quite a while. No one tends to really object to the point where they're aggressive or they really sort of are unhappy. And the best case scenario is that you're interacting with people, and you start to just build your confidence. You start to really just expand your kind of social skills, really, because you're putting yourself in quite a sort of difficult situation, and it can be quite challenging. But when you kind of nail it, it's like, oh, that's great. I feel really good about that now.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like, are you someone who pushes you outside your comfort zone or not, right? Like, it's that constant, are you going to push yourself outside of that comfort zone, even though it's not comfortable to do and even though it's difficult to do? Or are you going to be in a position where it's like, oh, I really love that photo, but I'm not going to strive to get it, right? Or I'm not going to ask permission to, oh, can I use your window? Or do you mind if I take a portrait of you? Or, can I have access to your roof? Or, so, whatever it is that you're striving towards, in the concept of like you're a city photographer or whatever, I've had situations where I just ask, like, I just walk into shops and go, oh, hi, I'm looking to do this, yada, 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 would you mind if I use your window, right? And in most cases, places are just like, yeah, go for it, like, but
and the worst thing they could say is no, and then you just walk. I think that's the bit for some people, is just Obviously, I think we all, suffer for that fear of rejection. You don't want to feel a bit silly if you've asked somebody and they say no, but that's the worst thing that's going to happen. You usually find, which again, as things start to open up and things start to improve, when you can, going out with a friend, if you're lucky enough to have, a friend that's into photography, you want to go out and shoot some photos together. Sometimes being with someone else gives you a little bit of confidence. I found myself going out, if I'm out with a friend, you feel a little bit more confident to sort of ask people to take a photo. You feel a little bit more. I guess it gives you just a bit of a security blanket because you're out with a friend. You feel more conversational, and you're more likely to sort of strike up that conversation to get the shot that you want. Really, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's one of those things that's really, really important to establish community as well, right? A lot of what you're talking about there is community and establishing a point where you can have a network of people to create with and shoot with, the people that are on the same wavelength as you, and they are, people who you can go to and you can have a conversation with about whatever it is you're worried about, even if it's not even photography, right? But you're also, when you're out shooting, it gives you that option to be like, you have models there as well. Like other photographers are like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Let's do whatever you want. I think that's a lot of what I've seen with like the boys, me and Chris hang out with and go out and shoot with as well. But also, that when someone has an idea for a shot, if you're in an environment where people can, it's an accepting environment. It's like, oh, I've got the shot idea. It's like, okay, cool. Let's work out, and then it becomes like a group effort of like how to actually attain that shot for that person.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. See, because I mean that's the thing. I mean, so there's this real different schools of thought on street photography in particular. So I've probably said street photography about 10,000 times on this podcast already, but what I'm going to say is that I probably wouldn't pigeonhole myself down that route anymore, because the idea behind street photography is that it's all candid. You're capturing an authentic situation, and sometimes you are, and that when you do that, it's certainly feels good. But I've now moved towards, if I'm going out with a friend or we've kind of got a model to work with, it's creating that, sort of cinematic type moment, and yeah, you're staging that, but you're still kind of out on the street. It's still got that sort of city urban feel to it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I found that's been the new challenge for me. When you spend so much time kind of doing street photography, you're always capturing the candid moments, so you become very aware and you have a heightened sense of kind of watching what's going on around you, because when something unfolds, you want to be quick enough to capture it. So when you then start working in a more closed situation, it's quite difficult, because I found in the beginning, I thought, I don't really know how to create that situation. I know when I see it, but if I've got a model, I was sort of struggling to, how do I direct them to do the thing that I want, because I'm so used to just seeing someone do something and capturing it. It's hard to sort of mold that situation, and for me and for my where I want to take my photography, I certainly want to learn a little bit more of that in terms of creating a scene, telling a story, but telling it in your own way. Because if you rely purely on sort of candid street moments, you're not always going to be able to tell the full story that you want. So there's an element of both, and for me, it's just a point now of kind of broadening my horizons a bit to learn another skill, really.
Yeah, of course, 100%. I mean, for me, I think it's always, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, right? Like, if you're someone who just does street, then try and do something that has a model, right? Even if it's a friend of yours, right? And I mean, the next follow-up question that was going to be, like, what advice have you learned, or what advice would you give to people who are looking to do more directing-esque shoots, where they have a model, whether it's their friend or actually a model, or they're looking to actually, become more of a photographer for hire kind of scenario, where a model, they reach out to a model and it's like, hey, we could do the shoot, it's gonna be really cool, we could do this, etc. What kind of advice would you give from the kind of learning experience that you've had in regards to actually starting to do more model based work, I guess you would call it?
I think it depends on what you're trying to do, and I think that's something that you need to be clear on. So the where I'm trying to go is kind of to conceptualize a kind of shoot with a model. It's telling a story. So you have a concept that can help you kind of decide how to pose that person or what to capture, because you know the kind of story that you're trying to tell. If you're just wanting to take some nice portraits of a person in a nice setting, I would still get some. I think posing's the biggest thing, because unless you're kind of going to shoot with a pro model that will just hit all the right poses, you as the photographer are always going to need to have some input. And in fact, the other way, I've shot with friends that just kind of want to have a bit of a go, and I've shot with people who kind of probably do modeling on a bit more of a professional basis. Both still need just as much direction, because the more professional model goes to kind of the stock poses, and for what I try and create, those things don't necessarily work. So you're trying to get that person to be more natural. So you're kind of with the professional model, you're trying to bring them down a little bit to be more natural, and with the sort of friend that might just be giving it a bit of a go, you're trying to sort of big them up and get them to just be themselves, really, because you're trying to tell their story.
Yeah, absolutely.
A big thing for me is use things like Pinterest. If you're going to do a shoot, build a board. Just go on there, and you can get lost in the amount of stuff that's on there. But build a board, and then you can try and look at those shots and put your own stamp on them. A particular pose you might want to try, and when you're on the shoot. So the things I do to try and I'm not shy to. I'm quite happy to mid shoot. I get my phone out and I'll tell them what I'm doing. I'm just looking at these poses, and I get them to look as well. Do you think we should try this one? Do you think we should try that? Just be conversation. Don't just go quiet. If you're struggling to think of the next idea, don't just stand there kind of awkward, because you're gonna feel awkward. The model's gonna feel awkward. The whole shoot kind of starts to become a little bit difficult then. So just keep talking, and build up their confidence. If you've taken a bad shot, don't draw attention to it, because the model's going to think it was them that was bad. And it almost never is. When I'm on shoots, if the shot's wrong, it's me. You don't, and even if they have done something that you think I'm not sure about, just move on. It's your job to direct them in the right direction. So I think a big part is try and prepare as much as you can. But ultimately, there is an element of just going with the flow when you meet that person. If you are just going to meet in a location and just sort of have a wander and just see what unfolds, that can be quite nice. You can end up with things that you weren't expecting. The last one that I did, which the most recent photos on my Instagram are with a friend of mine, and we just met up, we just had a wander, and we captured some really, really nice stuff. She isn't a professional model, but she just nailed it, and she was really easy to work with, because she was creative, she had her own ideas, but she responded really well to direction as well. So when you've got that in working in harmony, you're always going to end up with some good results.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think it's one of those things that, like in anything, like if you're honest with like whoever it is you're working with, or your friend, or your mother, etc., okay, like that, be open, be like, right, I'm out of ideas. What do you think? Like, it's this problem, or it's this problem, etc. Like on any photo shoot, the plan will go like you can plan all you like, right? But in some contexts, that you'll have to throw the plan out, right? Like it's the same with video, it's the same with photos, it's the same with anything. And the main thing I've found is, being aware of that and being okay with the fact that you can throw the plan out and be okay with it and be fine, but also being transparent and being like, right, okay, so that didn't work. Okay, cool, but what about this, right? Or okay, cool, we both have no ideas. Let's go to Google. Let's find out, right? Like everyone has a smartphone. In most cases, you can connect to the internet like that, right? We're very, very lucky to be in this era where we can do that, or maybe not unlucky, depending on how you think about it. But the point is, it's a tool to be used, right? So go on Instagram, go on someone's Instagram you really, really like their work of, and be like, oh, okay, what do you think of this? Do you think we can emulate this? Etc. And try and the key word there is emulate, right? Don't copy flat out, because you're gonna not have your own style then, right? And you're always gonna be a shadow of that other person if you do that.
Well, you see, this is a big thing of mine, is that people are reluctant to try and see in circumstances. I've tried to emulate what another photographer's done, whether that be in the editing process or whether that's actually in camera. The reason for that is, so my view is, I compare it to my other hobby, or something that I was passionate about before photography, was playing the guitar. I've done it for a lot of years, and not so much now, but I've always enjoyed it. When you pick up a guitar, you don't write a song, you don't write a new song, you don't start playing a new riff that you've just created. You play Wonderwall 6,000 times. You play it and play it and play it until you've nailed it. And then once you've nailed it, you think, right, okay, well, I know those chords now. Maybe I rearrange them and come up with something of my own. So I would say to someone who aspires to shoot photos in a particular style, if you want to just, if someone looks at what I do and likes the look of it, go out and do it. Go out and choose the exact same composition. Try the same editing. Now, there's a difference here between ripping people off. Don't kind of rip people's look off. Don't just steal. But if it's a learning exercise, and a big part of it is, if you're going to use these things on social platforms, reference the person. If you've copied that person, or you've tried to recreate something that they've done, then just tell them. I find a lot. I get tagged in photos from other Leeds photographers, and they'll say, saw this photo that Adam took and wanted to have my own go. Cool, I love that. It's great to see that you're inspiring people to do things a little bit different. But yeah, I think try and, if you've got your own, if you're ultra creative and you've just got your own style off the bat, and you run with it, then that's brilliant. But if you just want to recreate a few things what people have done, just to get a feel for it, because like anything, photography it's challenging. You've got a creative side and a practical side. So where I think I've sort of transitioned now is, I'm trying to be more creative as opposed to just being technical. That's that subject is sharp, they're in focus, the background's right, the exposure's right. You can do all that, and you can buy expensive lenses, you can have an expensive camera, and you can take really, really sharp pictures of a flower, but it's still just a picture of a flower. If that's what you do, great, but there's more to it than just the gear and sort of getting a really sharp, crisp photo. Sometimes the ones where it's gone slightly wrong can still have their sort of charm if there's a story behind it. So I think I've now got to the point of, okay, I know how to use my camera. I can kind of do what I need to do out of it. Let's now try and be creative. Let's think a bit more creatively around what's in the frame and how do we want to portray that. And I think that a lot of people do. They get a new lens. It might be a prime. It's a 1.4 or 1.8. They just want to shoot everything wide open because that's like, that's what they think they're paying for. So I've paid for a lens that goes to 1.4. I'm going to shoot everything at 1.4. Don't do that. You don't need to do that. It's all about just balancing out kind of the technical aspect and the creative, and they've both got a part to play.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It's one of those things, like I used the example of the 1.4. Why are you shooting at 1.4? Right? Do you want to completely isolate your subject? Okay, then that's why you're shooting at 1.4. But actually, do you want to see a bit of the background? Okay, then stop down. Right?
Exactly, yeah. So I mean, I'm the first to admit, like, my mistakes. I shot with a friend at the weekend, and looking back, I shot some kind of candid sort of portraits of him sort of working. He's a videographer as well. And when I looked at him, I thought, it's just, even though the lens that I'm using, it renders the background blur really, really nicely, it was just too blurred. You couldn't see any context behind what was there. So yeah, you don't always need to be. Now, for me, predominantly shooting at night, fast lenses are great because it gives me more option. But 85 mil at 1.4, your depth of field is about 3 centimeters. So the nose is in focus, the eyes are out. It's very difficult to nail it. So if you're shooting in the daytime, give yourself room. You're not gonna, I think again, trends get set by Instagram and people. This idea of bokeh is what everyone seems to want, and people seem to think that literally means background lights. It's those round, bokeh is just the background. It doesn't matter what's in the background, and it doesn't always look great just wide open. If you stop down a little bit, you realize that the image looks 10 times better because there's actually some context behind it.
Yeah, and it goes back to that story element again, doesn't it? It's that, why are you taking this photo the way you're taking it, right? Like, yeah, you can shoot it at 1.4. Yes, you can shoot it at 1.2. But why are you shooting it at those? Well, does it add to your story or take away from your story?
If you're starting out, exactly, if you're starting out and you're shooting in the daytime, stop down to way down and just make it easier for yourself. Don't, especially if you're shooting at a longer focal length. I mean, you see that, if you look at I don't know, like a 200 to 600, wildlife kind of lens, that's at the wide end, that's 6.3. When you see the picture that someone takes of a deer or something like that, the background's gone, and that's 6.3. It's because the longer length. So if you're at 85 mil, even if you're at 4.5 f5, you're still going to have that subject separation. The only real time you need is when you're shooting wide. If you're at 24 mil, then 1.4, sometimes you need that, because otherwise you just get this wide scene, everything's in focus, and it can look a bit like a phone picture. It can look like you've just sort of gone with your iPhone and just sort of snapped it. So there are times where you need it, and certainly if you're shooting in low light, if you're going out with a kit lens that's kind of f4 to whatever, you are going to struggle, because you're going to need the ISO up. You're going to I get asked that, it tends to be the case when you post images. People always want to ask the settings, what are the settings, and people get very wrapped up in that. And a big thing that people do when they go out shooting at night is the shutter speeds are just way too slow, because the camera's choosing it for them, and they don't really, they get these blurry photos. They don't know why, and you have to just teach people to kind of, there is a trade-off. If you change that thing, you've got to change that accordingly. The exposure triangle is quite key. It's such a cliche thing to say to people when they ask for tips, but it's kind of the most important thing from a technical aspect.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree. And it's one of those things. I mean, what I said to Chris when he was learning, and what I said to anyone when they were learning, is literally go through every single setting and change it by one stop or like one click and see what happens. Take a photo, right? Change it again, so on, and do that for everything. All right, do that for shutter speed on every single setting. Do that on aperture on every single setting. Do that on ISO on every single setting, and then find out what happens. Right? Oh, it's brighter. oh, it looks this way, oh, it looks this way, oh, it looks this right, etc. And what you'll learn eventually is you'll understand how to manipulate those settings to get what you want when you don't have the moment or the 5 minutes to piss around getting the right settings dialed in. I think that's a key element of street photography is that fast shutter speed. You're ready. You know exactly what you got dialed in. You got your autofocus points if you're shooting autofocus or whatever, or you got your focus dialed in, whatever. However you're doing it. And you're ready, right? You're just now, then as you said earlier, you're sat there waiting or stood there waiting, etc. for that subject, and then you're ready and you fire off, But I think going back to preparation as well, that's part of your preparation, right? In your head, even if you're doing it, because you'll get to a point with photography, like anything, where you can literally change your settings on your camera without even looking at your camera, because you'll just know. But even when you're walking to your next location, like maybe it's an area that you shot a lot, and it's like, okay, well this area gets really dark or gets really light or whatever, so you're already pre-changing your settings to get ready for that shot in case you see it, and then you're like, okay, cool, let's get the shot, and so on. So I think for me it's an important step in your photography, and once you get to the point with technical where it's no longer a barrier for you, then you can really open up what you can do creatively, because then you start really questioning, okay, well, how else can I, where else can I push the boundaries? What if I shot it from like lying on the floor? What if I shot it, from the top of a building or whatever?
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's exactly the point. Is that once you eliminate the technical aspect, once you feel confident with the camera, to the point where what you can do, how to create, to capture that situation, and suddenly you start moving around, change the angle, change the subjects, you're able to try all those different things, because the action of actually taking the photo is now the last part on your mind, because you can just do that, that you're set up, that you've got everything in the right way to capture it. So you can just then think purely from the creative aspect. If somebody's a cinematographer, a director of photography, they don't concern themselves with how we're going to get that shot. They just have a vision and they say, we're going to do it this way, and there's a team to do it. So once the technical part's out of the window, that's when the creativity can just blossom, really.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%, completely agree. I mean, for me, that was kind of everything I wanted to discuss today. I mean, I think at the end of the podcast, I always like to throw it back to you and sort of see, is there a burning question or is there a topic that you want to throw in before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's kind of covered everything. One thing that I would always say, and it's certainly what I try and do, whether it be through social media or through any other avenue, is if you've got an ability, we're looking with photography, if you know something, if you've got a skill, share it. Don't hold on to it. Be confident enough in your own skills to the point where you don't hold back helping someone else for fear that they're gonna copy what you do. You'll always be you. You'll always have your brain and your creative spark. So if someone, I get asked a lot about how I shoot and how I do things and how I edit, and I'm always more than happy to tell people I've been relentless in terms of asking questions. I've there's so many people that would attest to that, on Instagram, on Facebook, on in person. I just ask questions constantly, and I still do now. If I see something on Instagram and I'm like, okay, I don't understand how they achieved that shot, I need to find out, and I just send them a message. And a lot of the time, people are more than happy to share that with you. So I try and do that as well. I would never kind of hold back, because you want people to learn, and if people had done that to me, then I would have struggled. So people helped me. I try and help other people. Hopefully, they will help those people. So it's just a nice sort of chain of events. So that's what I would say. Don't ever feel as though you need to retain your secrets, because if you're really good at what you do, you'll always evolve, and your style will always just be your style anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree. And I think it's one of those things like there's no unique idea as well. Like people go, oh no, this is my way of shooting. Oh no, I've done this and I've learned this. It's like, well, yeah, but so's this person, this person, this person, this person, this person. Like the reality of the fact is, we're all playing with the same set of skills, pretty much. right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Compositionally,
exactly.
settings wise, etc. The things that stand us apart is then what we do creatively, right? From a technical standpoint, we're all the same, right? Maybe we shoot, maybe I shoot Nikon, you shoot Sony, Chris shoots Sony, some of the other guys shoot Canon, whatever, right? That's all just brand stuff, right? Okay, fine, right? There's some differences, of course, right? But at the core of it, we're all playing around with shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, a
Yeah,
lens and a
absolutely.
camera.
Yeah, exactly.
That's at a basic level. That's what every single photographer is doing. So, by you say, "Oh no, I'm not going to tell you how I do it." Well, I can tell you how to do it. Set settings, press the button. There you go. The rest of it is not rocket science. So I don't understand this constant no, possibly couldn't want to help you because you're going to steal my work. It's like there's actually so much more about who you are as a photographer and why you were hired, or what, in the case of when you're being hired, or in general, like why people follow you, why people like your work. Is actually more about you as a person and more about your journey, more about how you do things, why you do things, how long you've been doing things, how you consistent are you, etc. There's 1,000 different metrics on why it's not that gem that right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly. Yeah,
it's
and
not a
I
gem.
find that when people kind of, they'll send a message and it, hi, what were the settings for this shot? And I almost I'll tell them, but it's sort of irrelevant. You're not gonna be able to you're not gonna set your camera to those settings and replicate that shot. There's so much more gone on behind the scenes. There's so much more in terms of the editing. There's so much more in terms of the initial idea, which I'm happy to share those elements too. But yeah, people get wrapped up in the settings, and I guess that's just because when they're a beginner, I think a lot of people do get sucked into the trap of the reason that his photos look like that and mine look like that is because of his gear and because of his settings. That's the trap that you fall into. He's got an expensive camera, so that's why his photos are like that. Well, it's really not about that. It's the creative side is what's always going to be the key part. That's going to be the bit that will set you apart, really, if that's what you want to do. If you want to stand out, it's what you shoot, not how you shoot it, in terms of the settings dialed into the camera. Sometimes getting them wrong can have its own appeal. Missing focus, actually, yeah, looks pretty cool. Actually, you can, it's not an exact science, and I don't think it should ever be sort of looked at that way, because again, we go back to the point of somebody can take, technically speaking, the perfect image but of a boring subject, so it's still boring. You still don't want to look at it. You're not gonna follow that person. You're not gonna look at the rest of their work because it's it's just a boring photo. So it's like, move on. So the creative side, yeah, is definitely key.
I think, I think it's one of those things where it's kind of, do you, and you kind of touched upon it at the start, it was like, do you, when someone looks at your images or when someone looks at what you're doing, do they have a thought? Do they have what's the story here? Do they stop? Do they, what's the emotion? Do they have a reaction? Right? I think that's the key for me to know that you're doing something, right? That you're doing something different, because otherwise it's like, okay, well, you're just taking, like, arguably, maybe it looks a bit better or it's a bit sharper, but arguably then what's the difference between you and someone with a phone, right? And don't get me wrong, you can get some cracking images on a phone, right? And anyone who's shooting on a phone, you can give people with 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, whatever gear run for their money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it's not, again, like everything we discuss here and everything that I hope that, if you could take anything from this as the listener, the phone you have, whether it's an old phone, etc., that's the limitations which you have at the moment, right? So use them as your limitations to be able to still create, right? Still be able to go out and take photos. Every single photographer you probably speak to, and I'm sure Adam's similar, started on their phone, right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
They started creating on their phone because they were like, I don't know whether I like this or not, right? I just want to create it, see what happens, and then one thing leads to another. Then you buy a camera. Maybe it's a cheap one. Okay, cool. Then you learn settings. Okay, cool. Then you want to go, okay, well, what if I get this lens? Okay, cool. You get that lens. Oh, cool. That makes that a thing. Okay, then you get a new camera, and then it grows, right? And then as you do it more, your skills grow, and then your gear grows with you, right?
I cringe sometimes when I'm kind of on Facebook a lot of these, because I do shoot Sony. I'm in a lot of these sort of Sony groups, and someone will say, "Hi, I'm a beginner. I've just got the Sony A7 III and the 24 1.4G master lens. Does anyone have any tips and stuff?" And I'm just thinking, why have you got all that? Great, if money's not an object, then good for you. But why would you start off at that point if you've never used a camera? Why would you kind of go so big? Because if nothing else, like you just said, then you might not like it. You might go out and think it's not really for me. I'm quite happy just taking snaps on my phone. Because if you don't know how to use the camera properly, even an expensive camera, the photos are still not going to be as good
Yeah,
as you
you
can
still
probably
need
do
to.
on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. You still need to understand how to use shutter speed, ISO, and aperture.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's the
People,
reality.
they shoot raw on the camera and they're like, "Oh, it looks rubbish." Well, yeah, it looks flat because you're supposed to edit it. That's the whole point. And so people kind of fall into that trap. Whilst I'm not going to say that gear's not important. Of course it is, but it's important at the point where you've decided that photography is for you. Once you come to the conclusion that I like it, I want to do more of it, and I know what kind of things I want to achieve. If you know from measured thought that what you want to achieve can't be done on your phone, and you know that for a fact, then of course, yeah, get the camera. But if you're not at that stage, use what you've got. That's probably the biggest piece of advice. If you like taking photos, then take them on whatever you've got to take them on.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think it's one of those things which some people will run into or some people have issues with. I mean, but it at the end of the day, you hire. If anyone's hired, right, they're hired because of them. They're not hired because of, in most cases anyway, in my experience, they're not hired. I've never been. I know a client has never asked me, "What camera do you shoot on?" There's
Yeah,
never been
yeah,
a conversation.
they don't care.
They don't
Yeah,
care. They don't
exactly.
care. They wouldn't even know. Most of the clients I work with, they wouldn't even know. They're like, does it look good?
They're
Okay,
not
sure.
interested. Yeah,
It's like,
they don't care.
They care about the work. They care about me. They care about what I can do for their business in most cases, or how I can help articulate their story. Right? Like that's the point. Right? I mean, for those people who do want to see some of your work, etc., or reach out to you about questions about your settings, perhaps, or your editing style, or etc., where's the best place for people to reach out?
Instagram is always the best for me at the moment, which is Adam Bally. I'm always there, always available to answer questions. I really don't mind. I think it's all part of the process. And yeah, you'll see, if you want some encouragement, scroll. You don't have to scroll far down my feed to find what I would now consider quite bad photos. So if you want some encouragement, it doesn't always take a lot of time to build what you want. You get out of it what you put in, and you can see how my sort of style develop, and you'll see how it changes going forward. It will change and evolve over time, just as much. So yeah, that's the best place to see what I do. And yeah, I'm always happy to connect with more people, and help where I can, really.
Yeah, 100%. And I appreciate the time as always. Any final thoughts or anything that you want to mention before we sign off?
No, I think we've covered a lot there. Hopefully that's been useful to get some steer on my process and where I've come from. So no, yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you ever so much for your time, and
Thanks a lot.
welcome back, ladies and gents. I hope you took some value and enjoyed that little conversation, or long conversation, depending on how you think about it, with Adam. Thank you so much to him once again for joining me and giving me the time to grill him, talk with him about stuff that we're both very, very passionate about. As always, I'll leave his links along with Chris's in the description down below. But I'll be back next week with a brand new interview with someone more exciting. And for those who have been long listeners of the podcast, there is a new exciting trial version of the podcast hopefully coming out very, very soon. It will hopefully be out in the next coming weeks by the time this one comes out. So stay tuned to the channel. If you would like to be subscribed, I would really appreciate it, and I appreciate the channel growth, and I will see you very, very soon.